Can you see the screen? Yes. Oh, cool. Okay, that's good enough for me. All right. A little complicated here. I want to do some work with our cheat sheet, which is always fun to say. Yeah. Nice. I find, like I made a video last week of our class, but the videos were blocked by YouTube because it had copyrighted material on it. So what I'm going to do is do the lecture part of the class on video, but not the video part of the video. That doesn't sound very clear. I won't use any movies when I'm doing, oh thank you, when I'm making my video. I'll pause or something like that. All right. But anyway, you can find our classes list here for the Chinese students or for you right here for all of my 4 classes. Okay, now. Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay. That's right, yeah. Okay. Cheat sheet is here. I gotta have a drink. Better. If I finish this water, I have this water here. I don't know whose it is, but just kidding. I'm not going to drink someone else's water. Oh, and I know you're freshmen, so you're new here. I just want to mention this here. When you're in this classroom, please do not drink coffee and eat French fries and hamburgers at the same time. That would be disgusting. And don't put any peanut butter on your French fries either, because that would be gross. All right. Just so we're clear on that. I drink water here, sometimes coffee or tea, but I never bring a hamburger, so I'm safe. All right. The first thing I wanted to talk about is a first-person narrator. And the first-person narrator, of course, going along with grammar, is where the narrator is a character in the story. And they're telling their point of view for what happens. Sometimes the narrator, the first-person narrator, is the main character in the story. And in other cases, it's a supporting character, a smaller character, talking about the hero. Okay. Most of the time, your narrator will be what we call reliable. And just like it sounds, a reliable narrator would be telling us the truth and, you know, saying things about the things that are going on, and they would be accurate, they would be believable, and we wouldn't have any reason to distrust what the narrator says. But not every narrator is reliable. The other kind is called unreliable narrators. And unreliable narrators are people that tell us things that we're not sure if they're true or not. Or in some cases, it turns out at the end that the narrator was lying to us or was wrong about what's going on. There are movies in which the main character believes something is, you know, the way he thinks it is. And at the end they find out that they were wrong. I hate to talk about this particular movie, but it's the only one that's coming to mind. If you know The Matrix, in The Matrix, most people believe that they're in the real world and everything is just normal everyday life. But it turns out that the whole thing is on a computer or something like that, and the things that go on are imaginary. So that's a kind of situation where the narrator, in that case the camera, would be telling us things which aren't true, and we find out later that it was all untrue. Let me read what I wrote. These are first-person narrators whom the reader cannot completely believe because they're biased, ignorant, or mentally impaired. The narrator could be confused by drugs, alcohol, or an injury, or a sickness, or they just could be lying. You can also feel if the narrator, you could also feel as if the narrator is unreliable because of what they tell us. And it would include discrepancies or contradictions within the text of what they're talking about. And I've written a few examples about that. Let me tell you about one novel, and I don't want it to be a spoiler. If you're ever going to read this novel, I'm sorry for spoiling the end of the story. In that story, the main character is a detective from Belgium named Hercule Poirot. He speaks French, but he's not from France. And he's a brilliant detective trying to discover who kills the victim. But Hercule Poirot, the detective, is not the narrator. Instead, there's because the story takes place at a house party where everyone there is a suspect. Anyone there might have been the killer. And the story goes on. The narrator makes friends with Poirot and helps him to try to figure out who did it. And it's a novel, so it goes on quite a long time. You can read this here already if you haven't. At the very end of the story, everything goes through and to talk about the different possibilities, the different motives that people might have had for killing Roger Ackroyd. And just before the end, like at the second to last chapter, the narrator says to Poirot, he says, but Monsieur Poirot, this is so confusing. Everyone that we're talking about seems to have wanted to kill Roger Ackroyd, but it seems that everybody had some way to prove that they were not there in the room where Roger Ackroyd was at the time of the murder. It seems impossible that anyone could have done it. And the detective says, "Oh, no, monsieur. That is not true. There is one person who could have done it, and this person did kill Roger Ackroyd. It was you, monsieur." And the narrator is like, and at the last chapter, the narrator speaks for himself and tells the truth and says, "Yes, I was the one who killed Roger Ackroyd all along. It was not anyone else, it was me." And so the narrator was lying to us the entire novel up until the very end. There's another kind of unreliable narrator that we call the innocent eye. And when we say innocent in this case, it doesn't mean that they are not guilty. What it means is that the person is so, I don't know if you know the word naive, but it's a great word meaning that they don't understand what's going on. They've never, like someone who's lived in their house their whole life, and then they go into public and they just don't understand how traffic works, how society works, how to talk to people. And so they just don't get it. They don't know what they should do. They don't know why people are doing the things that they do. And so the narrator may tell us what they think is happening. We as the reader might recognize what the situation really is, but the narrator doesn't know because they're so innocent, like a child. I'll read what I wrote here. This kind of unreliable narrator is where the narrator is too naive to understand what is really going on. And one good example is a good story called Haircut by Ring Lardner, writing in the 1920s. The narrator is kind of a fool in that situation. He doesn't have much sense, not very smart. And so he's a barber, cuts people's hair. And so he's in the middle of cutting somebody's hair and talking a lot to the listener. The listener is the person getting a haircut. And in the barber shop, there's a glass window in the front, so everyone can see outside. And so the narrator doesn't understand what's happening. But actually what's really happening is there's a bank robbery across the street. He doesn't realize what it is. He thinks they're playing a game or something like that. I can't remember the details of that story, except that the narrator doesn't understand what's going on, but the reader can understand it. The reader can figure it out, but the narrator is a fool. You know the game of flipping a coin to see who goes first in a if they're playing a game or something like that. So the narrator, I'll switch to this microphone for a second so I can talk and use my hands. So here they've got the coin here, and they say, all right, let's see who's the winner, who can go first. Heads, I win. Tails, you lose. And if you think about that for a second, if it's heads, the first person wins. If it's tails, the first person still wins because so he flips up the coin and goes, well, what do you say, heads or tails? Tails. So, oh, I'm sorry, it is tails and you lose. It's most people would not fall for a stupid trick like that, but there are some people who would trust enough to be fooled. I am curious what this is. Oh, now I remember exactly what it is. So those are first-person narratives, and I want to give us a chance to read a couple of those stories, but not yet. A second-person narrator is told from your point of view. So the whole story is, you wake up, you get out of bed, you shave, and then you pick up your bag and realize you didn't get dressed yet. So you get dressed, and then you go out the door and catch the bus. You walk from the bus stop to your office and go upstairs, things like that. So it would always be what you are doing. You are the main character. And the narrator is someone talking to you. And here's a little example here. How do we do this? Right. Now it's here. Here's a really okay. This is kind of a scientific explanation of a series of books. Well, heck, I'll just tell you about Choose Your Own Adventure books. It's a whole series of books where the main character is you. You are the person having an adventure. And so what happens is, I don't know if you can read the words there. Maybe I can make it bigger. Okay, that's a little bigger. So it starts off and it says, you are all alone, sitting at the back of your house porch and looking out into the forest. For a second, you feel confused. What is that you see? Something seems to be moving in the forest. Is it a deer? No, you can see it's not a deer. You walk forward and get closer, and you can see it is a little man about 2 feet tall. What do you do? And then they give you 2 or 3 options. You talk to the man, or you run away, or you sneak around behind the man to see more. And so, okay, so if you're going to talk to the man, you're supposed to turn to page 63. If you want to run away, you should turn to page 12. If you did the other thing, then you would turn to another page. So you turn the page to page 63 because you want to talk to the man, and you read, "Good morning, sir," says the little man. I'm sorry to scare everybody. I shouldn't say sir because it could be a girl reading the story. "Good morning to you," says the little man. "I would like to show you something magical." And then more choices. You either say, you either agree to see the thing, or you ask his name, or you walk away, something like that. And so these books were all like that. And so the way the books work, you can have any of many different endings to the stories, and different stories, because they all work differently. Sometimes you die, sometimes you're successful, sometimes you get lost and never find your way back home. It's always different, and it's all in the second person. CYOA, choose your own adventure. They're great. Okay, and we learned about third person narrators. I'll just review that for a second. Third person non-participant is where the third person narrator is not a character in the story. It's just the storyteller, whoever it is. We never learn anything about who the narrator is. The narrator never says "I" about themselves. There are sometimes exceptions, of course, but the 3 different kinds of narrator are divided by how much they can tell you about characters in the story and what they know. What they know, what they think, what they feel, what they remember or see or hear. We've talked about this already in a story of an hour. An omniscient narrator can talk about whatever, talking about things that the characters know or think or feel, can even tell things about what will happen in the future or something happened far away. It's all possible. And I gave examples of each one of these things. Heck, I'll just read it. Here's my first example. This is an omniscient narrator who can tell about anybody. Gary sat, staring blankly at his hands. "I don't understand," he muttered, trying to make sense of what he was hearing. His head started to ache. So you can see he's thinking about what's going on. He doesn't understand. We know he's starting to feel a headache. So these are 2 examples of the kinds of things that an omniscient narrator would know. The other character, Rhonda, snorted. "I'm not surprised, Gary," she said snidely, a bit annoyed that he could not appreciate the cleverness of her attack. So she feels annoyed. Okay. "You were always a bit slow on the uptake." She thought about the time when they were children and she had stolen his marmoset. Marmoset is a small mammal, or a marsupial, I can't remember. Outside the house, unnoticed by both friends, a bear that had escaped from the zoo was climbing up their favorite, it's so ridiculous, climbing up their favorite oak tree. So that information is something that neither of the characters know about, neither of the characters knows about, but the narrator knows and can tell us. Okay. A selective or limited omniscient narrator would be able to tell you about the thoughts and feelings of somebody, but not everybody, not many people, maybe one, or maybe two. They wouldn't know the things that neither character would know. I'll read the way I wrote it before. The narrator reports the thoughts and perceptions of only a small number of characters, usually only one. The Story of an Hour is an example of a limited omniscient narrator because the narrator can tell us how Louise feels, Mrs. Mallard, but cannot tell us, for example, what Richards is thinking about, or her sister, or anybody else, or the doctors even. So here's the same story, but told from a limited and omniscient narrator. Gary sat, staring blankly at his hands. "I don't understand," he muttered, trying to make sense of what he was hearing. His head started to ache. So once again, we know what Gary is thinking. We know that his head is starting to develop a headache. But with Rhonda, we don't know. Rhonda snorted. "I'm not surprised, Gary," she said sarcastically. She seemed a bit annoyed that he could not appreciate the cleverness of her attack. See, we don't know it directly how she feels, but she looks annoyed. She sounds annoyed. But we don't know for sure. And the part about the bear is completely missing. All right. I think I'm going to... Oh, I spelled that wrong, didn't I? Oh, goodness. Oh, okay. I can accept that. All right, good. I'm going to skip these two. Oh, yeah. This is something I never talked to you about. Stream of consciousness. This was a part of the movement of modernism, which started in the early 20th century and probably reached its heyday in the 1920s, although there were earlier and later examples. Stream of consciousness. If you imagine this, of course it's not talking about a literal stream of water, but imagine for a second that it is a little river or a brook. The water flowing through this, this channel is moving along by itself, just going downhill. In the water, there may be other things. There may be fish. There may be dead leaves. There may be sticks from a tree nearby. There may be any kinds of things. There may be a plastic cup floating in the water. Who knows? Anything that is in the water will pass by this one spot, whatever spot you choose. And a stream of consciousness narrator would talk about everything and would speak out anything that goes through their mind, whatever it is. It could be part of the story. It could be totally unrelated. There, are limitless possibilities. So now I'll read what I wrote before. The narrator reports every thought that comes through a character's mind, often abandoning normal grammar and punctuation. That's true. And that's if you see a long sentence with no periods, no commas, sometimes not even normal grammar or missing capital letters. It's very likely to be stream of consciousness. The most famous writers of stream of consciousness are James Joyce and Virginia Woolf. Some people wrote an entire novel, if you want to call it a novel, using this kind of narrative. And I have an example right here. I included kind of too much, I guess. All right. This is written by James Joyce, who coincidentally was born on my birthday. He had his birthday first, though. He was an Irish writer from the 20th century. So, stream of consciousness is very random. You can read unexpected things in there that don't seem to belong, don't make sense. For this reason, a lot of people don't like don't like stream of consciousness writing because it doesn't make any sense to them. But sometimes, if you're patient and read through it a bunch of times, you can kind of see which thoughts in the narrator's mind connect up with other thoughts that they have in another place, and you can kind of get an idea of what's actually happening. Okay. Wish me luck. I'm going to try to read some of this to you. From train somewhere whistling the strength those engines have in them like big giants, and the water rolling all over them and out of them on all sides like the end of love's old sweet song. The poor men that have to be out there all night, from their wives and families, and those roasting engines stifling it was today. I'm glad I burned about half of those old Freemans and photo bits, leaving things like that lying about. He's getting very careless and threw the rest of them up in the WC 111. Get him to cut them tomorrow for me, instead of having them there for the next year to get a few pence for them. Have him asking, where's last January's paper? And all of those old overcoats I bundled out of the hall, making the place hotter than it is. That rain was lovely and refreshing just after my beauty sleep. I thought it was going to get like Gibraltar. My goodness, the heat there before the lavender came on, black as night, and the glare on the rocks standing up in it like a big giant, compared with their three-rock mountain they think is so great, with the red sentries here and the poplars. And they're all white hot, and the smell of the rainwater and those tanks. What? I'll stop here, but you get the idea. It doesn't make a hell of a lot of sense. But it was a style. And I just wanted to give you a nice example, because if you see this kind of narration, again, you'll recognize it as stream of consciousness. It's going to be on the midterm exam, so I wanted to give you a nice example. Good. Well, all right. Oh, right. There's another example here. I'll just take a quick look. Oh, it's the same one. Okay. And if the narrator, the third-person narrator, is a fly-on-the-wall narrator, that just means that the narrator doesn't tell us about the thoughts, feelings, perceptions of anybody at all. It just tells what could be seen, heard, smelled, but not anyone's thoughts. It doesn't have memories or wishes or anything like that. Okay. Oh, yes. Here's a narration term. I think I have to have another drink. being silly. All right. The phrase I wanted to teach you right now is in medias res. And that means in the middle of things. What that means is at the beginning of a story or at the beginning of a new chapter or whatever it is, things start out at the very beginning of the text with things already happening. You know, many times you would see a story and it starts off quietly with a picture of a large field of grass. And then we see a house in the middle of the field. And then we move closer to the house and we see someone standing on the porch. And we see someone else sitting down in a chair. And we get closer and we can hear them talking. And, you know, it starts gradually. In medias res would start immediately with action, with some kind of thing going on. In the example I just used, it would skip the picture of the big field, and it would skip the picture of the house, and it would skip the far off picture of the two people, and it would get right into their conversation without any introduction. And say, "You're a fool, Henry," shouted Leroy. "You've got to sell that land or you're going to be out of money forever." "You fool," said the other one, and hit him in the face. So, you know, something like that. Something would happen immediately. I don't know who Henry and Leroy are. Okay. Let me find out a little more here. 8:52. Good. We've talked about some of the elements of fiction, including exposition, where we learn about the characters and the social situation and all of this kind of thing. Usually, most of that is given at the beginning of the story, but not always. For next week, I want to start us off with 2 first-person narrator stories, but not this week. Dialogue, characters, plot. Oh, why did I write the word characters like this with a bold C-H-A-R? Well, the reason is because I've heard many people say this word as correctors or characters or something like that. And I wanted to tell you that's not the right pronunciation. It's characters. Just so you know. Correctors sounds very different. We know about plot. We've done that. These 2 terms here are important in a story. We have the protagonist, who is the central character of a story, and the antagonist, who is the one working against the goals. Oh, it's on. Or maybe I'm just on. The antagonist works to prevent prevents the protagonist from achieving their goals. And some people talk about the main character as the hero, but not all protagonists are good people. They're not, saving anybody, or they're not doing good things. They could be a bank robber, for example. But they're the main character. And the antagonist may not be a bad guy. Maybe it's a movie about a criminal who's trying to, I know which one, but you probably never saw it. There's a movie called The Fugitive, and the protagonist is played by Harrison Ford, who is a doctor accused of having killed somebody. The antagonist is Tommy Lee Jones as a police detective who is chasing, oh my gosh, I almost remember the character's name. How about that? Tommy Lee Jones, a detective chasing the protagonist, trying to catch him and stop him and put him in jail. Now, the policeman is trying to do something that he believes is good. He believes that the protagonist is guilty of having killed somebody. almost had the name again. He doesn't know that the protagonist is actually innocent, and he can't understand why. If the protagonist is innocent, why is he running away from the police? Why doesn't he just talk to the police and say, look, I didn't do it, it was somebody else? And so, in that case, the good guy actually is the antagonist, and the protagonist is also not a bad guy. So it's not like we have that kind of dynamic which we often would use. Okay. We talked about these things, we talked about conflicts, we talked about this plot timeline with exposition at the beginning and the status quo. I was just thinking about this. And then there's rising action here. Maybe this is a moment where things get more intense, and maybe here's another one, and here's another one. At the usually near the end of the book is the climax, the most exciting, most intense part of the whole story. I'm going to be talking with you about this with the story that we're going to be reading today and watching the video for. After the climax, things start to calm down, usually, not necessarily. And it may not be very smooth. There may still have some examples of falling action where there is new action that is exciting, but it still calms down and comes to a new status quo. Right. And quite at the end, we have the denouement. That's the French word which means untying knots, where all of the little mysteries that people didn't understand, or miscommunications, or mistakes are explained. All the lies are given to us like the like the first-person narrator who is actually the murderer in the story about the detective. Okay, so we're going to keep this in mind today. Status quo, ignatius res, we told again. Rising action, climax, falling action, denouement, got all of these. Right, we've done all of this. I don't need that one. Good. Okay, it's just about time for the bell. And I need to set up my equipment because what I have is a DVD to watch today. But this DVD comes from my parents in America, and we can't watch it on this computer without changing the settings on the computer. So what I did is I brought my own dedicated DVD player from America so that we can watch it on the other DVD player and don't have to mess up this computer. So, because I don't want to get people angry at me. I don't think anyone feels happy to have people angry at you. I don't know. Maybe there's some examples. Okay, so the bell is about to ring, so let's take a break. And I'm just going to talk here to the Chinese students for a second, so please just, do what you want to do, and I'll just speak here. Hey, students from China, hello. I'm not going to show you the video, I'm just talking right to my telephone here. I'm not going to record the DVD that we're going to watch. You can find this video, I'll put a link to a YouTube version of the same movie, and you can watch it by yourself. If I were to include the video in this recording, it would be blocked and no one could see anything, so I'm not going to do that. All right, so just let you know, this is probably the end of today's lecture. Okay, thank you. One more thing. This is week 4. Today is October 5th, 2020. See the timing perfect. It's perfect!